So this video is a step-by-step tutorial on how to accurately input a homemade recipe into MyFitnessPal such that you can accurately track macros for it. Okay, so today I'm going to be demonstrating by making a homemade dal recipe. It's an Indian style dal. If you use a different calorie tracking app than MyFitnessPal, totally fine. The same concepts are going to apply. I'm just going to demonstrate using MyFitnessPal because that's the app that I use. So the first thing you want to do before you start cooking is pick out the pot or pan that you plan to cook your finished recipe in and weigh that. So today I'm going to be using the Instant Pot. So that's this right here, and I'm just going to weigh this, and it is 833 grams. So this empty pot is 833 grams. I'm just going to write that number down somewhere. So I'm just going to make note of that on this pad. The next thing you're gonna do is weigh out all of the individual ingredients that you're using. So I have some tomatoes here. I've already weighed this out. So the tomatoes are 279 grams. So I'm gonna write that down somewhere. I also have some onions that I wanna weigh out. So I'm just going to tear the scale out. So now the scale is set to 0, and then I'm gonna weigh out my onions real quick. So I have, let's see, I have 153 grams of onions. So I'm just gonna write those down somewhere. So I had 289, I think, grams of tomato and 153 grams of onion. Okay, and then you're gonna wanna do that for all of the ingredients that you're using. So I have dal right here. I've already weighed this out. This was about 1 cup, which is equivalent to, I believe it was 180 grams of dal. And then any other ingredients that you're using, you want to weigh it out. So things like oils, you'll definitely want to weigh out. For spices like turmeric and chili powder, I'm personally not going to weigh those out. They're going to add very little extra calories, but if you wanted to, you could, or you could just slap on an extra 10 grams of carbs to account for all of the different mixes of spices that you're going to use. So one tip I want to share is how to track how much of something you used when your ingredient is already in another container. So for example, I want to use some oil to saute the onions in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this whole bottle onto the scale. I'm going to tear it out so that now the scale reads 0. And then I'm going to add however much oil I want to use. So I'm just going to pour some in here, and I'm going to put it back in here, back on here. So now you can see the scale reads -5 grams. So far I've added 5 grams of oil. So I actually want a little bit more like 1 tablespoon, which is about 14. So I'm just going to add a little bit more, and then there you go. That's close enough. So I've used 13 grams of oil right here. So now I'm ready to create my recipe in MyFitnessPal. So I open up the app. This is what my home screen looks like. Now at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see more with 3 dots. Hit that. Scroll until you see My Meals, Recipes, and Foods. Click that, and then hit Create a Recipe at the bottom. Click Enter Ingredients Manually, and then type in the name of your recipe. So I'm going to type in homemade dal, and for the number of servings, I'm going to input 1 as a placeholder for the time being. Hit next, and then begin to enter in your individual ingredients. So my first ingredient was tomato. I had 279 grams of tomatoes. I'm going to enter that, hit next, enter in the next ingredient. I had onions. So I had 153 grams of onions, raw onions. Enter in that. Next, I had 1.5 tablespoons of oil. So the last ingredient I had was a Lakshmi brand of dal, which I had already weighed out raw, and I'd confirmed previously that the nutrition information from the label matched the nutrition information in MyFitnessPal for this entry. And I had determined that the number of servings for this ingredient I used was 3.87. And I'll show you in a second how I calculated that. So I enter in 3.7, and then the last thing is, if you remembered, I didn't weigh out any of my individual spices. It just wasn't worth the hassle. So I'm just going to estimate that was 10 grams of carbs and input that. So you can search carbs, and I'm going to add in 10 grams to cover those miscellaneous spices. And then after that, you just hit next and save the recipe. So before I move on, I wanted to quickly show how I calculated the 3.87 servings of the dal ingredient I used. So this is from the nutrition label of the dal. It reads that one serving is 47 grams. So unless otherwise stated, always assume that the labels are for raw ingredients. So for my recipe, I had weighed out 182 grams of raw dal. So to determine the number of servings, I'm going to go into my calculator, take 182 grams divided by 47 to get 3.87. So the total number of servings I'm going to enter in is 3.87 for that specific ingredient. Okay, so now that I am done preparing the dal, what I'm going to do is take this whole pot, put it on the scale, and it reads 1953. So then what I'm going to do is subtract out the weight of the pot. So if you remember, the weight of the pot was 833 grams. So I'm going to subtract that out to get 1121. So I know that the weight of just my recipe alone of just the dal is 1121 grams. So I'm going to treat 1121 as the number of servings for the recipe I created. So I go back into MyFitnessPal, find that same recipe, hit edit, and change the number of servings from 1 to 1121. So now when I'm ready to eat, I can log however many grams I'm planning to eat for that meal as the total number of servings. So for example, if I want to have some just as a snack, I'm going to go ahead and put whatever bowl, tear it out to 0, and then I'm just going to add some of my dal, okay, onto this plate. And it reads 78 grams, or yeah, it reads 78 grams. So I'm going to log 78 servings of dal. So I open up MyFitnessPal. For demonstrative purposes, I'm going to log this as a snack. So I hit recipe, select the recipe you just created. I'm going to change the number of servings over to 78. So now I have the full nutrition profile logged of my bowl of dal. So that pretty much sums up in a nutshell how I go about accurately tracking macros for homemade recipes. Now, I use this exact same set of instructions for batch cooking meats as well. So for example, if I'm baking chicken breast for the week, I'll go ahead and create a recipe in MyFitnessPal, enter in the weight of the raw chicken breast as the ingredient, and then weigh out the total number of grams of the final cooked chicken and input that as my number of servings. One more tip to share is that it's helpful to have an ongoing list saved somewhere of the weights of commonly used pots and pans. So I have this saved in my notes app on my iPhone. This way, if you ever forget to weigh something before you start cooking, you have a reference here.